So good morning, colleagues. I think that there are more than 200 people already that have joining in. So while others are joining this session, let me introduce the sessions to all of you. So hello, everyone. My name is Muriel Poisson. I'm working at UNESCO, one institute of UNESCO that is called IIEP, the International Institute for Educational Planning. And I'm the acting team leader for IIEP's new knowledge management and mobilization team. And so I'm extremely pleased to welcome all of you to this launch webinar on our latest publication, very much hot from the oven, in fact, that is entitled Leading, Teaching and Learning Together, the Role of the Middle Tier. So I hope that you will have a chance to go through all of this publication, and you will see that this publication casts the spotlight on an often neglected but critical set of actors, those working at the middle tier of the education systems, such as district education officers, network facilitators, supervisors, teacher mentors. We all know that those agents are critical ones within the education sector, as they can make or break reforms as mediators of new policies to the front line. And so the main issue of this new book that we will be discussing today deals with on how middle tier roles can be reimagined and strengthened to support teaching and learning, and how innovations can be cultivated as regard the role of professional development of those professionals working at the middle tier. So today's webinar is part of a series of 2 webinars. This morning, we will be discussing how instructional leaders at the middle tier can support teaching and learning, building on the research that has been co-led by IIEP and our colleagues from EDT, and in particular focusing on the experience of 3 major countries that we heard about today, that are India, China, and Rwanda. And on Thursday, we will be looking into how to move from policy to implementation and what it takes for instructional leaders at the middle tier to be successful. And so I would very much like to encourage you to join us also for that second webinar. While we wait for a number of other participants to join, I have just a couple of housekeeping announcements to make to all of you. Let you know first that this webinar is being recorded, that this webinar is available in French and English. So if you need to listen in French or you need to switch to English, please have a look at your screen. Click on the little globe on the right-hand side at the bottom of your screen to shift from one language to the other. As you will see also, due to the number of attendees, we have disabled all your microphones and camera functions for those who are not speakers today. For questions to our speakers, we would like to encourage you to use our Q&A box. You may submit your questions either in English or in French. And if time allows, we will also give you the opportunity to raise hands and to pick up some of your questions during the next webinar scheduled on Thursday. So please stay tuned. We will also be sharing links and additional information and resources in the chat box. So please keep also an eye on that one. We would like also to share with you the social media pages for both IIEP and EDT, and would like to invite you to follow our work via LinkedIn, Twitter, and also our e-newsletter, and also to share your experience of this webinar by tagging or hashtagging IIEP and EDT. So both IIEP and EDT are committed to furthering the discussion about the middle tier. We are very grateful for your time today to learn with us about how the middle tier can contribute to improved learning. And for today's sessions, we have a very exciting panel of speakers made of researchers and practitioners that I will now briefly introduce. So first, we will hear from my colleague, Barbara Tournier, who is program specialist at IIEP, who will provide a general overview of the overall research project. Next, we will hear from Dave Childers on his research in Delhi. Then Swang Yu Chen and Wang Song from the East China Normal University will be speaking about the research carried out in Shanghai. Then you will hear from Jean-Pierre Mugiraneza from the Building Learning Foundations program in Rwanda, who will share his research in his country. And finally, you will hear from Charlotte Jones, who was a previous global head of research and development at EDT, and who will provide an overview of our research findings in terms of the practices that we have observed regarding instructional leaders. Very important, we will then hear from instructional leaders in Delhi, in Shanghai, and Rwanda about the perception of the role. And so I'm very happy to welcome also as part of this session, Dr. Lan Shen, who is Educational Researcher Officer at Shanghai, Deogracias Twinzinze, who is National Leader of Learning in Rwanda, and finally, Murari Jha, who is a mentor teacher at the Teacher Development Coordinator Program in Delhi. And so last but not least, I'm happy to introduce my counterpart at EDT, Tony McAlevey, who is Education Development Trunk's Education Director, who will be chairing this discussion today and who will take us through what promises to be a very lively and enriching session. So over to you, Tony, and I wish you all a very successful webinar today.
Thank you very much, Muriel, and welcome to everybody. Thank you for finding the time to join us for this important webinar. And it's been a great privilege to be working with IIEP on this particular project. We've got a lot to pack in, and I suggest, therefore, that I begin by inviting Barbara to give us an overview of the research project. Barbara.
Hey, thank you very much, Tony, and hello to all. I'm very pleased to share with you today our latest work on instructional leaders at the middle tier. So together with Education Development Trust, we investigated how professionals at the middle tier of education systems can contribute to improved teaching and learning. We started working on this together in 2019, when both our organizations acknowledged that this level of the education system really wasn't getting the attention it deserves. So in this presentation, I'll give an overview of the rationale behind our research, how we conceptualized it, and what we learned. So when we think about education quality, we immediately think about teachers and teacher training, but rarely do we focus on the support that they get locally. We often hear teachers are struggling with little support, that central leadership and policy is too distant from what's happening in classrooms. And in fact, in previous research we conducted at IIEP on teacher careers, what struck us was how isolated teachers felt and how much they valued having professional conversations with their peers and getting peer support to improve their practice. Across all sectors, successful and motivated professionals work in environments where there are high levels of expectations and challenge, but also high levels of support. How can we make sure that teachers benefit from such support that is ongoing, organic, and not ad hoc? Teachers and head teachers are just a visible part of the education system. The middle tier actors have to some extent been neglected in the machinery to deliver learning. And yet there's great potential at this level. Instructional leaders at the middle tier who are working with a large number of teachers and schools can have a multiplier effect. In higher income contexts, investments in the middle tier over the last 20 years have been credited with contributing to improving teaching and learning in numerous ways. But research in low and middle income countries has largely treated district or middle management staff as compliance monitors rather than agents of change leading instructional practice. So that the middle tier represents an important source of untapped potential in which most systems already invest and which has strong potential for improving learning. A few words about our research. We set about this research with the hypothesis that middle tier instructional leaders can be positive agents for change, and we tested our hypothesis through empirical case study work in 5 jurisdictions, so Delhi, Jordan, Rwanda, Shanghai, and Wales. and we'll be hearing from 3 of these today. We selected our case studies primarily because they offered promising examples of middle-tier reforms, either because roles were being reoriented around coaching and support, or because new roles were or had been introduced. The case studies vary greatly in terms of the demographic size, the geography, the income level, the education structure, the middle-tier roles, and also in terms of the maturity of the reforms. Most of the instructional leaders were drawn from expert practitioners among the ranks of teachers and head teachers. And this was an intentional strategy because we really wanted to highlight systems based on peer leadership. And that is where we see the most exciting developments taking place. So our main research question was, in what ways can instructional leaders at the middle tier act as change agents to improve teaching and learning? And we had a subset of research questions. The first 2 that we'll be addressing in today's webinar are, what are the professional practices of instructional leaders at the middle tier? How do these practices bring about change in teaching and learning? And then in webinar 2, we'll be looking more at implementation issues. For this one, we'll be dealing with what conditions need to be in place for these instructional leaders to be effective, and what are typical challenges and policy recommendations for implementation. So how did we conceptualize this? What do we mean when we refer to the middle tier? I must admit, it was also new terminology to me when we started the project. And basically, it's that messy place between schools and the central level. So district, sub-district, or the regional levels of education systems. And in our model, we conceptualized 3 groups of professionals: those working at the state level, those working at school level, and the middle tier professionals positioned between the state and the schools. And there are many actors in the middle tier that have administrative and management functions or positions geared towards instructional improvement. And all those roles serve an important purpose. But in our research, we were looking specifically at instructional leader roles in the middle tier. So professionals in such roles are working across schools and localities to improve teaching and learning. They typically include functions such as teacher mentors, pedagogical coaches, cluster coordinators, but also head teachers who act as system leaders. And these instructional leaders can be located in government structures, or they can be school-based actors, such as mentor teachers or head teachers who are brought up to the middle tier to intervene across schools while keeping their position as teacher or head teacher. And so just a few words about the terminology. So just to note that the middle tier is not widely used. It's used in some specific contexts. In other places, the term intermediate level of education is preferred, or the middle space, or the meso level, or simply district used as a generic term. And also, we refer to instructional leadership, but it has also other terminology that is used, such as pedagogical leadership, educational leadership, or leading learning. So we've used middle tier and instructional leadership throughout the project for the sake of consistency. And that's the terminology that we went with. So in the project, we found 5 main ways instructional leaders at the middle tier act to improve teaching and learning. The first one is that we saw that they can provide support for school and teaching improvement. They help to promote professional collaboration within and across schools. They can broker knowledge to promote the use of evidence. They can provide local instructional direction and system alignment. And they can test innovations and scale up promising practices. So I'm not going to go into detail here. My colleague Charlotte Jones will be going in detail over this framework later on in the webinar. And then we have to bear in mind that middle tier initiatives are not always successful. Sorry. So it was critical for us to interrogate, how do education systems enable instructional leaders to be effective? So we looked at success factors and policy considerations, and we also reflected on program design, implementation, and sustainability. So again, I won't go into detail here because this is what we'll be discussing in webinar 2. So I'll now hand it back to Tony and look forward to hearing from Delhi, Shanghai, and Rwanda. Thank you very much.
Fantastic, Barbara. Thank you for giving us such a systematic overview of the project and the field. Great. So looking forward to hearing about the 3 case studies. And first of all, Dave, you're going to talk us through the Delhi case study. So over to you.
Tony, thanks so much. Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Dave Childress. I'm an independent researcher, and I worked with IIEP on the study and headed up the Delhi case study. So next slide, please. Great. So briefly what I'm going to do today, I'm going to give you a quick overview of the program itself and then talk about some of the impacts that we saw from it. So just to give you a little bit of background information to kind of the context that this program emerged in Delhi, Delhi introduced a wide number of reforms beginning in 2015 when the government started giving much more money to education programming. And that saw reforms over lots of different areas, things in infrastructure improvements, programs targeting students directly, and then several programs that targeted improvements for teachers and head teachers. And that's really where this TDC, this Teacher Development Coordinator program, lies, is in one of those programs that targeted support for teachers. What this program did is it started 2 new roles in the Delhi system, those 2 you see on the left side of your screen. The first of which is a mentor teacher. And a mentor teacher is kind of that classic middle tier instructional leader role that Barbara was talking about that our research really focused on. And what a mentor teacher is they were a practicing teacher that were recruited and selected to take on that instructional leader role. And they work in 4 to 6 schools, and they organize learning sessions, they provide classroom observations, they provide feedback to teachers, really working in that supportive role for teachers. The second role that came about was the Teacher Development Coordinator. And again, these are recruited from active classroom teachers, and they actually stay in their role and take on some additional responsibilities as a Teacher Development Coordinator. There is one of these in each school. And again, they are leading collaborative sessions, they're role modeling strategies in their classrooms, they're working with their fellow teachers in that supportive role. So kind of the way that this program works, it goes on a cyclical structure, and you can kind of see the progression on the right side of your screen. It goes in what they call a learning improvement cycle. So once each term, a key theme is decided upon with input from the state level, from mentor teachers, from the middle tier workers, the diet employees, the district employees, and then the NGO that partnered with Delhi to implement this program, STIR Education. So after they decide a theme, some past examples were enhanced communication and engagement with students or improved lesson planning. After this theme is decided, they come up with strategies and techniques and passing along best practices to the teachers to support them and kind of move them forward going along with this theme. So the first step is kind of facilitator training on passing along these strategies and these techniques. And those facilitators work at that middle tier level. Those are the district employees. And then they have something called a co-learning session with those mentor teachers where they're role modeling some of these new techniques and strategies. They're having brainstorming sessions. They're working together to come up with strategies to best support the teachers as they pass along this new information, these new techniques. From there, the mentor teachers work with those teacher development coordinators and their own co-learning sessions. Again, this is role modeling new strategies, working on those new techniques, coming up with those new ideas to pass down to teachers in the schools. To get it to the school level, the TDCs hold meetings in what they call their ART teams, their academic resource teams, and those consist usually of about 10 to 15 teachers, and they try to get a teacher from each of the departments in a school. So TDCs hold those meetings with them, again, passing along strategies, role modeling behaviors, and then kind of passing along all of that information they've gotten to teachers in the school. And then the really kind of key part of the implementation cycle is that the TDC and the art teachers take these strategies into their classrooms and they open their doors to their colleagues. They encourage peer observation and they encourage teachers to come in while they're actually teaching these strategies and these techniques with real students. That way, their colleagues can see how these are implemented in real life in real time. And then another important aspect of this program was the feedback cycle. You can see how in the chart it kind of goes from the top down, but there was also an important aspect that went from the bottom up. Teachers and TDCs would provide feedback to the mentor teachers and to those folks at the middle level to tell them what's working and what's not. And there was also a function at each of the meetings at the school level where the teachers and the TDCs and the head teachers would fill out Google feedback forms that's saying what's working, what's not, what do you think needs to happen, and so forth. And that really helped the planning process for future learning improvement cycles so that the middle tier, the district, and the state employees could get that valuable feedback about what's going on. All right, next slide, please. Perfect. And then I just want to briefly go over some of the major impacts from the program that we saw. While there were lots of takeaways, kind of broke it down into 6 major things. The first thing I'd like to talk about was a shift in culture really at the school level. This was talked about time and again from all of our interview subjects, and we talked to teachers, we talked to TDCs, we talked to mentor teachers, we talked to middle tier folks, and everyone talked about the shift in culture that they had seen at the school level. And kind of what this means is teachers started talking about academics and they started talking in a professional manner, kind of on their free time. Think before and after school or at the lunchroom, in between classes. Teachers shifted their conversations from general social talk or, just kind of the way you chit chat with someone to these professional ideas. They talked about strategies they were using and some of the techniques they were using in that classroom. So it just really shifted that culture to a more professional setting in schools. And to go along with this, we also saw an increase in collaboration. So the open door policy encouraged collaboration amongst peers in schools. They started, doing that peer observation. They started sharing those techniques. And then since mentor teachers also worked at between 4 and 6 schools, they could connect teachers and they could connect peers at different schools as well. So collaboration increased both inside of schools and between schools as well. The third major impact of the program that we saw was student and learning outcomes improving. Now, this doesn't necessarily refer to, huge increases in standardized testing, because that wasn't exactly what we were looking at in our evaluation. But what we heard about was more individual examples of teachers connecting with their students. They had suddenly learned a technique where they reached a student they had never been able to reach before. And teachers also talked about increased classroom engagement and just, more engagement all around in their classrooms as they saw students kind of come into their class and start speaking up that had never done so before. A fourth major impact of the program, we saw more ownership and initiative at the diet at that district level. So STIR Education, the NGO that partnered with Delhi, kind of took the lead in a lot of the planning early on in this program's implementation. But as it got more established, those middle tier district leaders really started to take ownership. They started to take on planning. They started to take on implementation, and they started to figure out more and more ways that they could better support teachers and increase their role in a supportive fashion. The fifth impact of the program we saw was the enhanced usage of feedback and data. Again, I talked about those Google forms that the teachers and the TDCs filled out and passed along. That really started to push how those learning improvement cycles were designed. And all of that feedback was really important in figuring out how to change and improve the program as it moved forward and how to make it better. And then a final impact of the program we saw was strengthening connections for adaptability. Obviously, we talked about that shift in culture and the collaboration, how teachers, were really opening themselves up to each other and really working together in an enhanced way. And that made them stronger kind of for unforeseen circumstances. And obviously the timeline that we talked about them, that was COVID-19, school closures, distance learning, those types of situations that everyone was dealing with. We saw those strengthened connections between peers really helped teachers out in that difficult time, whether it was figuring out how to use a new technology or just kind of, support for each other in a really difficult time. Those connections that were already there really helped them out and really helped prepare them for a difficult situation. So those are kind of the main impacts and kind of a very quick overview. That is, I think, the main thing I wanted to say. So I'll go ahead and pass it back to Tony for the next presentation.
Thanks very much, Dave. Yeah, thank you. That's really interesting. And that emphasis on the key actors as professionals who continue with their own classroom practice, that emphasis on issues to do with culture and collaboration, that's compelling. I'm sure that's very important. Great. Well, look, I'm delighted now that we're going to hear about the experience of colleagues in Shanghai. So Xuanye and Wei, you're very welcome. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, David. Now let's move to Shanghai. The Shanghai is a large system. It's quite complicated. So in the context we know in recent years, its educational system has attracted researchers' interest as a high-performing system in teaching and learning. And just next page, we will see that the whole system we have this 1.43 million students and 120,000 teachers here. And the middle tier leaders, we focused on actually just 1% of all the teachers. And in our study conducted in 2021, we used the archive data and the policy documents. And if you are interested, you can download the full report from IIEP website. Next page, please. Next page, yes. Okay, now I will introduce the most complicated part. And rather than our simple project or some network, actually, this middle tier instructional leaders, they are embedded in the system between bureaucracy and the profession. And so then we were termed as kind of a middle tier space. Based on our archive data, field interviews, and previous research, we configures the middle tier in Shanghai as a professional space between the bureaucracy and the schools, just shown in this figure that is on the top is bureaucracy and the bottom the schools. We filled them by 3 structural pillars of teaching research system in the left in green, teachers educational research system in purple in between. And then we have this kind of in-service teacher training system in the right side, and also in purple red. And those 3 types of instructional leadership roles positioned in those respective systems. The 3 intermediary professional pillar systems, actors positioned in the system, they have this fluid exchanges of ideas, practices, and talents. They constitute this middle tier space in Shanghai. So that's why we just coined it after this third space. We will have this kind of 3 pillar system, but they have this fluid practice, and those instructional leaders, they can move among them. So these 3 pillar systems, for the left, the teaching research pillar system aims to improve teachers' classroom teaching by designate teaching research officers at various levels to organize and lead group lesson observations and frequent feedback to teachers. What is meant here, the research, is the notion of studying together, the teachers studying together. And in the middle system, the middle pillar, that is the teachers' educational research pillar system, is based on the belief that every teacher in the system can apply scientific methods to discover educational principles and solve their practical problems. Teachers, educational research officers coordinate and support research projects led by individual teachers and schools in their districts or on the municipal level, which is meant here by research, as opposed to the left pillar system, is enabling the practitioners to conduct action research. So they have this kind of a division of labor. And on the right side, for the teacher training pillar system, provides professional learning opportunities beyond schools. The system has an advantage in selecting and pooling master-level outstanding teachers and principals who are purposefully organized and supported to recruit and develop aspiring teachers in professional communities. And the three pillar systems all were originated in Shanghai and developed along the local needs for high-quality teachers and the support for ongoing educational research system. And in depth, if I could introduce more about the teacher research officers in the pillar system 1, that are those people, their roles. Actually, usually they will organize subject teaching research activities, prepare students' assessments and feedbacks, and develop high-quality textbook and the teaching resources. And as for the teacher educational research officers, actually we have one, Dr. Lan Shen is by side of me, and she will introduce in depth about her work. And for this group of officers located in the pillar system 2, they usually organize and guide teachers' research projects, advise and support school-based improvement or reform projects. And also they will collect, distill, and promote tested educational experiences. And for the last, those are master teachers and master principals pulled out and selected from different schools, but they can move between school, among schools, and in the middle of the system. So, and those professional learning activities of those studio, each selected master teacher or principals based on, they will share professional interests, and they have this goal-oriented, problem-solving, focused, task-driven professional learning. They will plan and they will implement, and then they will generate outcome report, and also organize other learning activities around project research. So that's those brief introduction about this a little bit complicated system. So we call it a middle tier space in Shanghai system. And next one. Yeah, this is their professional structure. And then Wei will introduce about this impact, share with you.
Thank you, Shania. Yes. So actually, what makes the middle tier space different from a project, that is a systematic institutional being. It has a collective spirit, and it provides ongoing support for teachers and schools. Imagine a school, a teacher, even a policymaker at any moment, if you need support, professional support, if you need any resources, it's a place to turn to. The middle tier space is always there. So how does it first change? It first change in a top-down manner. It's a go-to place for policymakers formulating policies or reform documents for your school and teaching improvement when they need practical wisdom to make sure that is feasible, right? And when a policy or reform is launched, the middle tier space, the instructional leaders need to not just help teachers and school leaders to understand the policy. They actually work with them. They explore together with them at school, in the field, and try to turn the policy abstract policy guidelines into school-based practices. Then they try to learn from the lessons, the experiences, and then share it with others. Next, the middle tier space also supports and drives change that happen in a kind of bottom-up manner. So if a school or a teacher want to try something different, want to innovate, the instructional leaders would provide not just professional support, but also channel resources for them to do such experiments and innovation. So the picture on the right-hand side is an example of a school-based curriculum, which was initially explored in a school for disadvantaged children in Shanghai, and later, as a result of the middle tier leaders' effort, it became national, municipal, and even national policy. Also, the middle tier space serves as a safety net, an equalizer. The instruction leaders, they try to make sure they're redistributing the resources to schools in need, so that they can make sure the positive change actually could benefit every school and every student. So this is our summary. Of course, there are a lot to share, and we look forward to sharing more in later discussions. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you, colleagues. That's a fantastic presentation and some really, really important themes emerging. And I like this concept very much of the professional space and this emphasis on the need for clarity in terms of the structure, clarity in terms of the roles. You've brought that out so clearly, and the importance in terms of how we mediate policy. Some really, really important themes there. So thank you so much for that excellent presentation. And now I'm really looking forward to hearing about the Rwandan experience. So Jean-Pierre, you're very welcome. Tell us about what's been happening in Rwanda.
Thank you very much, Tony. Thank you for the previous presenters. My name is Jean-Pierre Mugiraneza. I work for EDT. I'm based in Rwanda. Today, I'm taking you through the Leadership for Learning system. I mean, the overview of a system that tried to establish a system of selecting and training middle tiers in Rwanda. And then later I will try to explain the impact that the middle tier had on Rwanda's education system, and more specifically on improving school leaders' competencies. Starting, the Leadership for Learning, starting with the overview, the Leadership for Learning fits into an FCDO-funded project called the Building Learning Foundation, being implemented in Rwanda at a national scale, I mean in 30 districts and in all public and primary schools. So the aim of Leadership for Learning was to enhance the school leaders' responsibilities around supporting teacher development, because we believe that if schools are well led, I mean, schools are led by competent school leaders, then teachers can be trained, and that will have an impact on learning outcome. So Leadership for Learning also system enhances collaboration among school leaders, which in one way tried to decrease the level of isolation among schools, but also helped the culture of sharing, learning, challenges and best practices, thereby giving more support to schools. Generally, Rwanda is not a big country. It's a country made of 30 districts. It's an administrative entity. Maybe if you want to know the size of one district, is in one district you will have about 100 schools. So in each district you would have sectors, And in each sector, you would have about 8 schools. And in each school, you would have parents supporting that particular school. So the Leadership for Learning consisted of having a middle tier that is supporting the existing education officials in those administrative entities. For example, at district level, 2 national leaders of learning were selected to support the district education officers. So the selection of these national leaders of learning based on their competencies, based on their experience as school leaders, and also based on their motivation to support other school leaders in that same district. Going down at sector level, 1 local leader of learning is selected in each sector to ensure that all school leaders in that particular sector, they have someone who is coordinating their capacity development. So the local leader of learning, LLL, was also selected based on his. I was also selected based on his or her experience as a school leader and also his commitment to support the capacity development of other school leaders in that particular sector. So all in all, we hope that the middle tier could transform school leaders' practices to ensure effective and inclusive teaching, which means we wanted to see head teachers or school leaders improving their competencies related to leading inclusive teaching. So the competencies we are targeting, we are ensuring that school leaders can have competencies related, in line with the Rwanda's leadership standards. There was an official document by the Ministry of Education by then, which was as a draft when we started establishing the system, and later the document, of standards for effective school leadership were finalized in 2020. So we wanted head teachers to achieve the competencies in line with those standards. And therefore, we thought that 476 NLLs and LLLs would support other school leaders in their district and sectors to improve the teaching capacity in all schools in Rwanda. So that's the overview of the model. And then maybe the next question will be how will the model or the middle tier support other school leaders to enhance effective teaching. So the selected NLLs and LLLs, their primary role was to facilitate the professional learning communities of their colleagues, the PLCs. So in the professional learning communities, these were opportunities for other head teachers to share their best practices, challenges, to discuss, and even be trained, thereby improving their competencies. And this appeared as one of the most cost-effective way of training all school leaders at a national scale, and even given the limited financial capacity in most of our countries. So another role for NLLs and LLLs was to ensure that all school leaders in their clusters have the support they need. For example, you will see NLLs and LLLs involved in coaching activities, ensuring that the newly recruited school leaders have required support, ensuring that those school leaders who are leading special schools, maybe because the schools are big or have a big number of students or learners, or they have other challenges, then the NLLs and LLS were involved in coaching those school leaders with special or challenges to the profession. And then the next question can be, how did the program improve the capacity of NLLs and LLS to train their peers? So we had a collaboration, a memorandum of understanding with the University of Rwanda. And then with them, we designed a practical course which aimed at improving the NLS and LLS competencies. And in this situation, we wanted NLS and LLS to have two sets of competencies. One, it is their capacity to lead their own schools so that their schools continue being the model schools in their clusters, their sectors. And another set of competencies was for the NLS and LLS to be able to support other head teachers. So in addition to what they are doing in their class, in their schools, they are also able to support other head teachers in the same cluster, and that would be through professional communities and coaching sessions. So we implemented 2 courses with the University of Rwanda, one for NLLs and LLLs, and after NLLs and LLLs had graduated from that first course, they also supported the implementation of another course for all head teachers. And this was like an internship or like an opportunity to apply what they have learned in the previous course. As a matter of fact, and as I'll be discussing the impact of that course, because of using NLLs and LLLs, we found that 92% of head teachers could achieve the leadership for learning competencies. They should show evidence that their schools are well led and they are promoting the effective teaching. Talking about the impact, the first impact can be seen from the system. Having established a platform like professional communities where head teachers or school leaders can be trained on a regular basis. So we can see that in all sectors, these professional communities are happening regularly, and it's an opportunity for all head teachers. I can give an example of some challenges the system experienced lately. There was a number of school leaders joining the profession, and even the legacy of COVID-19, there was many students joining schools, thereby the government establishing new schools. So with all those challenges, these professional communities showed, kind of defined the system resilience to support the new teachers. So another impact is the work, the coaching, the one-on-one coaching that is happening among experienced school leaders who are NLS and LLS and the newly recruited school leaders. So it's showing an impact because there is that support which is regular that is showing still the system's resilience. And also being a bit specific on the content. So now the priority has shifted. Now the priority in school of school leaders have shifted from being administratively oriented to being focusing on school improvement. For example, all schools have their school improvement plans, and NLLs and LLLs will ensure that every school leader who is joining the profession
You've gone on mute, Jean-Pierre.
Yeah, sorry. So I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, so, we just lost you. Well, one second.
Yeah, so another impact I was also explaining about this, the focus, the shift from school administration to school improvement, and also another resilience was shown as a matter of fact in COVID-19 crisis during the school closure, where these platforms, the PLOCs, were used to keep school doors open. And that was a success because at that time, countries like Rwanda with very limited resources and internet is not in everywhere, it needed a collaboration among school leaders for at least those disadvantaged students and learners can keep learning even in their homes. So that was another impact. Can I have another slide, please? Yeah, thank you very much. Then we talked about the impact around having a collaboration, collaboration among school leaders, the coaching sessions. But we have to also talk about the impact of the collaboration with the University of Rwanda. So as I said from the beginning, our aim was to improve school leaders' competencies related to effective teaching. So looking at where we started, that is in 2017, looking at where we started 2017, 2018, only 41% of school leaders were achieving their basic competencies. I mean, they are showing evidences that their schools are well led and are prioritizing the teaching and learning process. So in 2021, in one of the evaluations we did, and even a bidding from the monitoring data from the program, we found that as a result of the training that these school leaders had gone through, and as a result of professional communities and the coaching, the percentage of school leaders with basic competencies to lead learning in their schools had increased to nearly 100%. So something we celebrated, and we thought we could not have achieved this without the middle tier. So the middle tier does not only provide opportunity for supporting other school leaders, but it also defines the sustainability of having our systems driving learning and not necessarily having outside, academics or people outside the system coming in to train. It's a resilient, it's a sustainable way of ensuring competent school leaders. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jean-Pierre. That was so interesting, and clearly some themes. If we think about the two previous presentations in Delhi and Shanghai, to do with using the best practitioners as a key resource to do with collaboration. But also a difference in emphasis, because in Delhi and Shanghai, we were focusing on the middle tier and pedagogical improvement and classroom improvement. And in Rwanda, we have the middle tier in action in terms of leadership development and trying to develop this concept of the school leader as an instructional leader. So extremely interesting. So fantastic. And now finally, let's step back and think a little bit about the big picture and the framework that has emerged in terms of the overall research. And I'm handing over to Charlotte and Chloe.
Great. Thank you, Tony. Good morning, everyone. I'm really happy to share this conversation with you. My name is Charlotte Jones, and I'm really proud to have led EDT's contribution to this research partnership alongside many colleagues. And I'm here presenting our key cross-cutting findings on behalf of all of those EDT colleagues, as well as Chloe Timier at IIEP, who made really major contributions to the framework that I will share with you all. So when we started this research, a key question that sparked our interest in the middle tier, it was really a question about how to scale positive change in teaching and learning that might be happening within schools. So a big focus for us for the research was looking at what middle tier leaders actually do. How are they bringing about changes to teaching and learning? What's like the value add of these roles in the education system? I think so often when we think about scaling or systems change, we tend to think about the hard wiring, so org charts and accountabilities. But our focus here in this research was really about understanding the how change happens. What are the professional practices of these leaders as they bring about change? And I think we found some really interesting answers to that question across the case studies. As we had the job of synthesizing the research, we found that these leaders acted in 5 main ways to bring about teaching and learning improvement at scale. I won't read these out because I know Barbara offered a great overview of this of these 5 factors earlier. So what I'll do now is I'll dive straight in and offer some insights on each one of them and some of the evidence that we found across the case studies. So on to the next slide. So starting with the first area, so providing support for school improvement and teaching improvement. We know from the international evidence that teachers learn best when they're offered school-based guidance and coaching rather than some kind of off-site training. And what we saw was that the middle tier change agents, they played a really key role here by offering this school-based support to teachers. And what this looked like, it was things like coaching teachers, offering feedback, role modeling effective practices. We heard all about that in the case studies earlier. I think it's important to say that there was not automatic impact from policymakers orientating the roles in this way. The impact of their support, it really depended on the skill of the professionals, of the middle tier change agents, and on the level of trust and the mutual respect that they were able to establish with school staff. For example, we heard from David about the initiative in Delhi where mentor teachers organise professional learning sessions and provide feedback to teachers based on classroom observations. And at the beginning of that programme in Delhi, teachers told us that they had been quite sceptical actually of having an outsider coming in and observe their classroom. And it took time to foster a dialogue about academic issues and for that to take root and to get a kind of collaborative dynamic going on between the teachers. So I think a key takeaway for this one is that the relationship between middle tier leaders and teachers that we saw in the case studies, it was one of partnership rather than one of hierarchy or a kind of inspection-based dynamic. On to the next slide. So now looking at the second area. So we know from international evidence that when schools professionals collaborate together, their practice improves. But we also know that effective collaborative networks, they're not necessarily self-organizing. They can fizzle out and they often need some kind of catalyst and they need really great facilitation as well. And what we saw in this research reflected that. So we saw the middle tier leaders playing a pivotal role here as a kind of integrator. So they were facilitating collaborative professional learning. They were encouraging the sharing of expertise and the exchange of good practices in a collegiate and a collaborative way. And a great example comes from Rwanda, as we just heard in Jean-Pierre's presentation. So we saw the leaders of learning facilitate those professional learning communities across schools. And the interviewees reported when we talked to them that those learning communities had really developed a collaborative culture across schools and a sense of shared purpose. On to the next slide. Okay, so let's zoom in now to the third area, which is about brokering knowledge. So we know it can be really difficult for busy frontline practitioners to access evidence to use in their practice. But quite interestingly, across 3 of the case studies, what we found was that the middle tier professionals were acting as kind of knowledge brokers. So they were able to translate evidence and research into really practical solutions for teachers and head teachers to use. As an example, we heard from our colleagues in Jordan about a supervision model that was all about brokering evidence for teachers. In fact, the model, it's called evidence-based supervision. So what happens here is that supervisors, so a very typical role that we might see in different countries at the middle tier, those supervisors, they provided structured feedback to teachers using a bank of resources that summarize international evidence about pedagogical effectiveness. And a little plug here, if you would like to hear more about this model, Dr. Richard Churches from EDT will be speaking on this case study in more detail on Thursday at the second webinar in this series. Okay, on to the next slide. So in terms of the fourth factor, I would highlight that the idea of the middle tier being a kind of bridge in policy implementation, a kind of bridge from policy into practice, that came through really strongly from the case study evidence. As we saw that these professionals, they had a particular skill in translating policy messages into very practical recommendations that were meaningful at the school level, so that everyone was aligned on what was going on. Having said that, I would also say it's important to recognise that the leaders, they weren't just cascading policies top down. They were what came through from the research was that they were able to promote the voice of frontline practitioners in the policy making process as well. So it was kind of top down, bottom up, sideways as well. And I think here the case of Wales is super interesting. So in Wales, high-performing head teachers, they are promoted to system leadership roles. So they stay as serving practitioners in their school, and they play a leadership role across the system. And they participate in policymaking with central ministry staff through a very formal process that's called the Commission. And what they do is they take a policy problem and they combine frontline views from their peers, their peer head teachers and teachers, and they combine those with insights from international best practices. And they combine all of that together and make recommendations to policymakers. So what we saw was that the middle tier change agents were a key part of a kind of an adaptive system, a really important kind of intermediary role in systems that are trying to get better at learning from frontline experiences. Okay, on to the next slide, which is the fifth area that we identified, testing innovations and scaling up promising practices. So we know that all school systems are full of bright spots and innovations, but the challenge that we find quite often is how to spread those and scale them so that all schools can benefit. And as professionals at the crossroads of policy and practice, what we found was that the middle tier leader was in quite a unique position to pilot innovations and to scale up that work. So a really interesting example from our colleagues in Shanghai, the education reforms that were initiated at the municipal level, they're usually piloted on a small scale in schools under the leadership of the middle tier staff. And then the middle tier professionals have a formal and I think quite a fascinating role in formalizing experiments and thinking about what are the general frameworks for scale up. And their job very much includes monitoring and documenting the scale up process through active communication about this in publications, in seminars, and in workshops. So those are the five key characteristics that we saw of middle tier leaders across the case studies. I guess a final cross-cutting reflection from me is that although we have framed the research as about the middle tier role, it's important to say the case studies, they don't just show the work of one isolated role. They show, I think, how relationships changed within the school system towards relationships based on trust, shared purpose, a productive dialogue about teaching and learning to support a positive improvement dynamic. And I think for us, that has become quite a useful insight and food for thought as well as we think about what sustainable systems change might look like. We really look forward to hearing your reflections on the research, and I will hand back to Tony.
Thank you very much, Charlotte, for that very stimulating overview, and a reminder that we're talking here about change management and that this can be difficult. So there will be skepticism, resistance. We need to think about how we build trust. We need to put a focus on relationships. So I think that's a really such an important point. Right. Well, look, I'm delighted to say that we're also joined by three colleagues who are actually working at the middle tier in 3 countries. So I'm going to be inviting them to comment a little bit on their work, and perhaps I could start with Mr. Murari Jha, who is from Delhi, where he is a teacher development coordinator. So you're very welcome, Murari. And maybe I could ask you to kindly say a few words about your position, your responsibilities, and maybe tell us a little bit about the changes in teaching practices that you've seen as a result of your work. Maybe give us some examples.
Yeah, so thank you very much. I'm really excited to be with all of you at this forum. And I'll just connect to what David was already presenting about the mentor teacher program and teacher development coordinator program. So I'm one such mentor teacher who is working in the middle tier here in Delhi, and for the last 5 years now. And the program got introduced in 2016, so it's been 7 years. So there's a lot of change I'll see that is happening, and which are based on our previous experiences also. So the importance about the middle tier has been, there in our policy papers in 1983-85. We had a commission to suggest on teacher education, and even they suggested that it's difficult for teachers to go out and seek help from the institutions like SCRT or NCRT. So we have to think of certain structures that where the teachers has access within the school. So like this middle tier is that structure, that support system which is available to teachers within the boundary of the school. So we reach out to these schools where a support system, a resource that is available to teachers. You guys have already mentioned in your research, and that I validate being one of such mentor teachers, that if there is a policy initiative, so for instance, just 2 years ago, India has introduced new education policy. And because the teachers are limited to the classroom instruction and limited exposure to the policy matters, it's we the people who bring them to that what this new education policy is saying, the way it is going to affect our rules, the kind of expectation it has from the teachers. And it's also we the people who actually collect the voices from the ground and also try to push it to the policy forums, that these are the demands and that need to be somewhere accommodated in the policy making. So this is basically the role that we are doing. And also, since we are moving from one school to other school, so like as mentioned earlier by David, each mentor teachers are mentoring 4 to 6 schools. So we work with around 300 to 400 teachers. So we come across wonderful teachers in a particular subject. And so if we come across something very different practices, we bring from that school to another school. So kind of, a busy bee, collecting good things from one place, taking it to the other place. So that's what we have been doing on the ground. Yeah, that could be, I think,
Okay, that's a fantastic metaphor, that you are the bee collecting the honey of best practice and sharing it. Yeah. That's a beautiful image, and you've also emphasized this point about the communication, getting the voices from the ground, but also explaining policy, that two-way relationship, which was mentioned by colleagues from Shanghai as well. I think that's an interesting point. So what are the difficulties in the role? What challenges do you face, would you say?
Well, I see there are two challenges. One is the large number of teachers we work with. So it becomes difficult to work one-to-one. So it's like we cannot be available to each teachers equally. So that is one. And the second thing that was also mentioned when David was presenting, that in the beginning, now this is a settled issue, but still the kind of acceptance, because we come from, the instructional leaders only. So like we are the teachers who have been given this role. So the acceptance that you were the colleague a couple of years back, and now you are coming to explain us the policy or teach us pedagogy. I also see it very, very much linked with the way education got shaped in a country like India, which has a colonial history. There is an association that the authority and power comes from the hierarchy. So somebody who is up in the hierarchy, having certain authority and position, only when they come and say something that carry values. But if there is a teacher reading a lot, doing research and saying something, he may not carry value because he was the colleague a couple of years back. So that I find is still a challenge, but gradually we are breaking it.
Okay. Well, look, those are both really interesting points. So there's a question about the workload, but there's a really important point about the role. And if you're in a context where people are used to very traditional hierarchical relationships, then somebody coming along in this more developmental supporting way, that can be a little bit confusing in terms of, if you like, the power dynamic. I think that's a really interesting point. Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Jia. Well, maybe I can turn to Lan Shen in Shanghai. And turning to the context of Shanghai, Lan Shen, you're very welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. It's great to have people actually doing these roles as part of the panel. And perhaps you could kindly explain what your work consists of.
Okay, thank you. I'm working in Shanghai Academy of Educational Science. My work is in the middle tier of education system. For my opinion of view, I play several roles in this system. One of them is to transfer. I frequently get involved in the on-site school practice to absorb, to discuss, and to improve the curriculum implementation and the teaching and the teacher instruction. I could transfer the policy discourse to knowledge and languages understandable to practitioners, such as new curriculum standards and plans. School practitioners have their own set of practical wisdom and practical logic. The top-down education of curriculum policies often need translation and adaptation. Therefore, my colleagues and I usually need to transform highly abstract and general policy documents into feasible action research projects. We organized various professional learning communities. For example, regular seminars open to principals and teachers from different schools who are interested in the same topic of research project. In these learning communities, there may be primary schools and the junior high school based in different areas in Shanghai, but usually they have common interests in those research topics. Each school comes up with their own research plan, and they share their different approaches in practice with each other. In the process of educational research for practitioners, schools encounter many new concepts of politics, as well as theoretical interpretations, different from their previous understanding of curriculum and teaching. Policies and the theoretical discourse needed to be constantly clarified and transformed into their understanding and action.
Well, look, thank you, Lan Shen. That's really interesting. And you've mentioned this business of translating policy documents into a language that's understandable practitioners. So that's very interesting. What else do you do? What other things do you do?
My second task is to align the implementation requirements with the education reform policy. That is, we will conduct school-based research with schools, especially in the case study of curriculum development and the teacher instruction. I usually help the school leaders in those mutual learning community to improve their school curriculum and teaching practice. These improvements are not limited to the teaching of individual teachers, but based on the different condition of different schools. So I also provide professional resources for communication and the learning in school curriculum management, teacher professional development, and other aspects for school leaders. We spend much time with schools that are willing to do case studies with us, thinking from the perspective of children and keeping in mind each school's specific needs for development. We try to cooperate with school leaders. At the same time, we also need to summarize useful school cases, which can be used as a policy implementation reference for other schools.
Great. So tell me more. Can you elaborate on the support you provide to teachers?
The second task is to provide professional companionship and support their growth by dissecting their daily experience into sharpable practical wisdom. Teachers are comfortable with relying on their own experience. Our job is to help teachers jump out of their comfort zone by providing partnership and passionship. We support and encourage teachers to pay attention to the solution of practical problems happened in school. Through analysis and solving practical problems, teachers can increase practical knowledge and become real practical experts. As a result, teaching and learning could be improved. When I work with teachers, I do not teach them a specific experience or practice. I'm not a master or an expert trainer. Instead, I support teachers to use some research methods to solve their practical problems, such as students learning information analysis, classroom observation, formative evaluation. I also help schools design their own school-based curriculum and conduct school curriculum planning, and consequently help schools or teachers from their findings and generate final products. So to summarize, my work is to build a bridge between theory and practice and promote the transformation of policy into practice. I'm also a partner for teachers' professional development and a companion for school improvement.
Great, thank you so much, Lanshen. Really interesting. Lots of similarities, I think, with what Mr. Jha was telling us as well about this. You call it companionship relationship. It's not like a boss relationship. It's a companionship relationship. And he had his beautiful metaphor of the bee gathering the honey, and you have your beautiful metaphor of the bridge making connections. So thank you so much. And now I'm delighted to say that De Gratias is joining us. I know he's had some technical problems, so thank you so much, De Gratias, for persisting. I hope the line is working well. And De Gratias is a national leader of learning in Rwanda. And De Gratias, maybe you can tell us about your position and what it consists of. And again, give us some sense of the changes that you've seen in practice as a result of your work. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the previous presenters. My name is Deogratias. Primarily, I'm working as a head of a school, and I have been selected as a national leader of learning. Our work as national leaders of learning is a good work for changing school as in improvement. We are working with our school general assembly committees, whereby we are setting our school improvement plan, and we use data informed for elaborating the school improvement plan. We also work at school level in collaboration with the school subject leaders, the school-based mentors, and teachers in the COP. This stands for the community of practices. And at the school level, we used to coach teachers and to conduct a mentorship for the new teachers who are recruited and placed in our respective schools. Thereafter, at sector level, head teachers meet in a platform which is called Sector PLC, and this Sector PLC put together local leaders of learning and all head teachers, whereby they sit together to share the best practice from their schools and to discuss about some issues related to their schools. In the same platform, national leaders of learning and local leaders of learning sit together to make an induction for new head teachers who are coming in these jobs. And not only we do these induction activities, but also we coach them, whereby we used to have 1 day per month to make a visit to some new schools and coach new head teachers on how to elaborate this school improvement plan, how to set the school vision and mission. At the district level, we also have a platform whereby national leaders of learning and local leaders of learning are gathered to sit and discuss about some issues in the education system in our respective districts. By this platform, we work together to set some guidelines on educational issues and challenges. We also make these intervention cycles whereby the system leaders of education sit together to target some issues and elaborate an implementation plan to see if all the head teachers in the sectors will have the same or the common understanding about some issues in our own district. We would like to know if this way of working is changing something. We say that this one is changing something in our education because no one school is working alone. From the school level, we have our COPs, the community of practice, and we conduct also the mentorship and the coaching. At the sector level, we have our sector PLC, through which we discuss and share our best practices from the sector. And at the same time, we induct the new the teachers to go back to their schools and make change. In the same way, we also meet at the district level, whereby we discuss about the educational issues in our own district. And that is how our system is led. Thank you.
Thank you. That's really interesting. And I like the idea of the working with the community of practice, as well as working with the individuals through these mentoring relationships. That's an important distinction. Well, colleagues, we're nearly out of time, I'm afraid. We could continue this conversation, I'm sure, for a long time, but we're nearly out of time. Maybe, Dave, I can invite you to ask De Gracias a question I know that interests you about the relationship between middle tier work, his work as a serving practitioner, and the district.
Sure. I was just kind of curious how you've seen that relationship with those district officials grow, as your program kind of got more established. Have you seen those district officials buy in and get more integrated into the program as it's become more established?
Thank you for this question. The district officials are buying these practices because they have got another line of having facilitators. Let's take this example of a district education officer who has to go around of the district. If he has this platform of 15 or 20 local leaders of learning in their respective sectors, once they meet in the district platform, the information that they got there is spread throughout all sectors, and they go there not only for spreading the information, but also for following the implementation. So this is the way the district officials are buying our practices. It is good for them to work with us, and we are delegated powerfully to make change. Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, look, a key theme that's emerged here is the importance of having credible, experienced practitioners working with colleagues. And I think Murari and Lanshen and De Gracias, you embody that. So I thank you. I would just
like to add one line, if you allow.
Yes. Yeah, Murari, go for it. Yeah.
So that I have heard all the three presentations. So what coming out to me that all of us, in fact, in our setups, are actually shaping, developing, and tapping into the professional capitals. And that capitals we are bringing to the teachers, and that help them develop that professional honor, which I feel is the most important resource in the hand of the teachers.
Yeah, that's a very nice way of conceptualizing it. And I like this idea of professional capital. I think it's completely consistent with what colleagues from Shanghai were telling us about this professional space where this rich dialogue is possible that increases the professional capital. So that's really interesting. Well, we could continue, except that we can't continue because we're out of time. But thank you so much for those excellent contributions. And now I'm going to pass back for some concluding remarks to Muriel.
Yes,
thank you.
Thanks to all of you. Thanks, Tony. Thanks to all the speakers and the instructional leaders that we had the chance to hear this morning. I very much hope that you have enjoyed this session, that it has prompted your curiosity to read the full report that you've heard about, and that is available both on IIEP's and EDT websites. So we very much encourage you to download those. So warm thanks to all the panelists and instructional leaders for this morning's session. After this session, I'm sure that you have a much clearer idea of who are the professionals working at the middle tier, and also on how they can provide teachers with appropriate spaces when they can share, they can collaborate, and they can help solve problems together, and also with other professionals. And especially through the 3 country examples that have been provided, I'm sure that you have found a lot of food for thought on how the middle tier can help provide instructional direction to school-level practitioners, play the role of knowledge broker, help scale the innovations, but also, as we heard from Wanda, the important role that they can play to improve the use of data for school improvement plans, for instance, or on how they can play a role also on raising standards in school leadership. Of course, through the different presentations that we've heard, the middle tier can look quite different from one context to the other, but we heard also about a lot of commonalities among the most impactful instructional leaders with insights and lessons that I'm sure that can benefit to your own education systems. Just few lessons coming out from our discussions on how instructional leaders can foster change management. We've heard of how in increasing level it is to support teachers in terms of coaching, in terms of developing partnership relationships, as school-based guidance is key. We've heard about the role of the integrator for exchange of good practices related to professional learning that they can play in a very collegial way, fostering a collaborative culture. We have heard about the role of knowledge brokers, translating research into very practical solutions at ground levels with the reference that was made to supervision models. We've heard about how they can help make the bridge from policy to practice, both from a top-down and from a bottom-up approach, leading to more adaptive systems. And we have heard also on how much they can help pilot and scale up solutions at school level, including by documenting and monitoring this scale-up process, including through seminars and workshops. And finally, there were very interesting references regarding the role that they can play in terms of fostering productive dialogues and also promoting trust, both at local and school level. So let me stop here, just as an encouragement for you to read the whole book, and tell you again how much we very much look forward to your participation on our second webinar that will be held on this Thursday. And as you know, that we will deal more specifically with implementation. You can still register to this Thursday webinar using the link that is provided in the chat. And so we all very much look forward to seeing you there again. Thank you, colleagues. Enjoy the rest of your day.